Let us heed the words of Thomas Jefferson. To compel a man to furnish contributions of money for the propagation of opinions which he disbelieves is sinful and tyrannical. Stay with us. Catholic Parents Online is next. Hello and welcome to Catholic Parents Online, a program where we explore the issues parents face while raising their children. I'm your host, Colleen Perfect. Never before in the history of the United States has a presidential administration issued an order that directly violates the First Amendment to the Constitution. However, that's exactly what President Obama did in January of 2012, when his administration mandated that all health plans must cover sterilization, abortifacients, and contraception. This mandate violates the teachings of the Catholic Church, as well as other faiths. Joining me to help explain this serious attack on our religious freedom is Professor Teresa Collette, a professor of law at the University of St. Thomas, where she teaches property, bioethics, and constitutional litigation. She currently serves on 2 archdiocesan committees, and by appointment of Pope Benedict, she is consultor to the Pontifical Council for the Family. She has written numerous articles and co-edited 2 books, one exploring Catholic perspectives on American law. She serves as a Special Assistant Attorney General for the state of Oklahoma in defending its laws about abortion. I am honored and pleased to welcome Professor Teresa Collette. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, thank you. This is exciting to have you.
Well, it's always a privilege to be a part of your show.
Teresa, you are also married and have a wonderful husband. You want to talk a little bit about that?
I am. My husband and Bob and I have been married for about 34 years. We have 3 children, one of whom is married and has 2 children living 8 blocks away from us, which is a great blessing.
Yes.
They come over every Sunday and we go to Mass as a family and have Sunday brunch. And then our other 2 children have been living out of state. Our son still lives in Colorado and will be getting married this August. We're very excited about that.
Yes.
And our daughter has just graduated from Johns Hopkins and has come home for the summer, awaiting her wedding in October to her Marine lieutenant who is halfway around the world helping protect our country.
God bless them.
It's a busy time in our family.
It sure is. It's wonderful. Well, congratulations on all your,
Thank you.
And your daughter's accomplishment and everything. That's
Thank
wonderful. Well, Teresa, we've got a very important topic we're talking about tonight, and thank you so much for coming to address it. I'm going to start right out and ask you, could you please explain what is stated in the First Amendment of the Constitution and how this protection is being undermined by Obama's Health and Human Service mandate?
Well, that's a question that has a lot of pieces.
Yes, I know. You do it. You do what you can with it.
Let me break it down a little bit. Many people don't seem to understand that our founding fathers had a firm belief that in order for freedom to exist in civil society, it required that the people have a common morality, and that religion was an important aspect of developing the common morality that would avoid the necessity of policemen on every corner. It's easy to see that when people are not, through their own self-discipline, willing to act in a morally correct way, that the law has to get more and more restrictive so that we don't harm each other. And so the Founding Fathers really believed that freedom required morality and morality required religion. And what we also know is that religion requires freedom. And so if you think about it, it's a 3-legged stool, and every leg is important in American culture. Freedom, morality, and religion. And if you diminish any single one of those, you ultimately diminish all 3. You make the system unstable. And that's why our founding fathers, in crafting the Bill of Rights, put religion at the very beginning. It's not only within our Bill of Rights, but it's our first right that is protected by the Constitution. Now, a common mistake that people often make is they think that the Constitution gives us our rights. That's certainly not the American founders' understanding. Rather, it is that the Constitution secures government's recognition of the rights that we have innately by simply being made in the image of God. The Declaration of Independence was very clear about the fact that there were unalienable rights and that we were endowed with by our Creator. And so when our founding fathers were thinking about what rights might be endangered by government overreaching and what should be most precious and protected, at the very head of the list is the right of religious freedom. The First Amendment specifically says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And then it goes on to protect free speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to petition the government for redress. So the religion clauses are two. And in this, the founding fathers were trying to protect against two twin evils, if you will. First, the idea that a state religion would be required, that Americans would have to worship in a particular way or worship a particular God. We saw this in English history, and it always led to bloodshed and a belief that, or at least a diminishment in belief of God, because people who are not free to worship God as they understand God's presence in the world typically will become more cynical and more angry about it. So the first clause, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment religion, was directed to the federal government and said, unlike England, there will be no Church of the United States. But they were equally concerned about the ability of Americans to practice the religion that they believed in. And so the second clause says, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So not only may Congress not set up the Church of the United States and make us all worship in a particular fashion, but Congress may not interfere with citizens' rights to freely exercise their religious beliefs in serving God, not merely worshiping God, but serving God in the way they understand their call to be. This is a really important distinction because if you listen to a lot of our public officials today, they would like to diminish this clause to simply being a freedom of worship. But the rights of conscience, the right to freely exercise our religious beliefs, are not simply limited to that which occurs within the church walls.
Right.
Rather, as followers of Christ, we are mandated to go into the world and to evangelize the world and to serve those. In fact, in the book of St. Matthew's Gospel, requires Christians to go into the world and give drink to the thirsty, food to the hungry, to clothe the naked, to visit the prisoner, to bury the dead. And so these acts that we know as Catholics as corporal acts of mercy are not merely things that we do because they're nice or because they're part of some sort of community service. We do them because Christ requires it of us. Yes. And so religion requires us to go into the world outside of our churches. And that's really what's being protected by the free exercise of religion clause.
Teresa, how is this protection being undermined by Obama's Health and Human Service mandate?
Well, when they passed the Health Care Act, President Obama and Congress empowered the Secretary of Health and Human Services to determine what services must be provided through every insurance plan, whether it's a public or a private insurance plan. No one anticipated that they would include a requirement that all insurers pay for contraception, abortion drugs, as well as sterilization. And so when they made that requirement, when Secretary Sebelius issued her requirement to that that effect. The Catholic Church responded by saying, we're an employer. We employ people in our Catholic schools, our Catholic universities, our Catholic hospitals, our Catholic charities organizations. And to require us to pay for abortion-inducing drugs or sterilization is something we simply cannot do. And so this idea that there should be an exception that's limited to just what happens within the four walls of the places where we worship, which is all the exception that the Obama administration has offered to date. If that exception stands and is not expanded, it will really require the bishops and the churches to pay fines. And so instead of having that money to feed the hungry, to give drink to the thirsty, to house the homeless, we'll be paying government bureaucrats to enforce an unjust law.
Wow, amazing. It's like Catholic Charities, we don't ask the people coming into Catholic Charities if they're Catholic. We need to ask them, are you poor, are you hungry?
And that's exactly the point, because the exemption as it currently stands is an exemption only for those organizations that employ only people of the same faith and serve only people of the same faith. So a parish itself, the parish secretary, might fall within that exemption. But the Archdiocese does a lot more than that. Catholic Charities in this community is a very important part of making sure that we house the homeless and feed the hungry.
Yes.
We run all sorts of shelters. We provide all sorts of social services for these people. And we do it not because we're some surrogate for the government. We do it because Christ commanded us.
That's right.
The exemption that they want to offer us now, at least according to the president's speech, it's important to know, has not been put into writing. And so even if the current exemption, which is restricted only to places where all the employees share the employer's religion and they serve only those of the same religion, even if they expand it to the president's proposal that the insurance companies that insure these different organizations will handle the payment of it, that doesn't work in our Archdiocese. The Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis is self-insured. We simply use Blue Cross Blue Shield in order to administer the money that we ourselves have saved up for the medical expenses of our employees. So in fact, this is no compromise at all. And that's what led at over 40 organizations, both dioceses as well as Catholic universities and Catholic hospitals and Catholic employers. Over 40 organizations and individuals have sued in almost every circuit in the United States, saying that their religious freedom is being infringed by this new mandate.
Good for them.
Absolutely.
This is great. Well, Teresa, can you talk about the meaning of what the difference is between the separation of church and state? People, they twist that so much. I've heard different explanations of that. Could you explain the real meaning of the separation of church and state?
That phrase actually comes from a private letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Baptist of the Danbury congregation, who had written him congratulating him upon his election as president. And he responded by assuring them that he would enforce the church's liberty to act freely in the state, and that he would not try to restrict the church's liberty. Now, that's a far different idea than the sort of naked public square that we hear from leaders like Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Because what Jefferson was promising was that the church would remain free to serve the people and to fulfill their obligations to God as they understood them, and that government would not interfere with them. Instead, that phrase has too often been understood as that the church should withdraw from the public square, leaving it only to government officials and to government organizations to serve. And that's not correct, and it certainly doesn't represent the views of Thomas Jefferson.
Right. Well, I am proud of our bishops. I think that they've drawn a line in the sand. And could you talk a little bit about how they are not going to comply with this unjust law, and they've come out with a statement entitled "Our First Most Cherished Liberty." Could you talk a little bit about that statement, Teresa?
It's a terrific letter from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops addressed to all people in the country, not just Catholics, and it explains the importance of religious liberty, both to the American experiment as well as to the human person. They talk about how freedom of conscience must manifest itself in freedom of action, and that without that freedom to believe and to act on those beliefs, we essentially have lost all freedom. They give a number of examples in that letter that are particularly striking. They talk about the case out of Boston where Catholic Charities was forced to close down because they were unwilling to place children in homes of same-sex couples. Now, that case is particularly egregious because Catholic Charities of Boston was actually, according to the Massachusetts Attorney General, one of the best agencies at placing hard-to-place children.
Really?
Children that were in sibling groups, handicapped children, children who came from multiracial backgrounds, children that it's hard to find a home for. And notwithstanding the great public good that Catholic Charities was doing, the Attorney General said that it was important to eliminate the bigotry of the Church's teaching about the nature of marriage. That's really troubling. Catholic Charities, or the Catholic Refugee Program, was not allowed to compete for a recent federal contract to provide care for the victims of human trafficking. And what's really troubling about that example is that the agency that was to award those contracts had set up a 100-point system to determine what the characteristics of the providers were, the potential providers, and scored them. And our Catholic organization outscored every other organization significantly. But because we were unwilling to agree that abortion and sterilization were appropriate ways to help care for the victims of human trafficking, we were excluded from competition for those contracts. And these things are happening over and over and over again. And that sort of coercion on the conscience of Catholic organizations will deprive the people that we are trying to serve from the goods and the services that we are so accomplished at providing. Inner city schools do a wonderful job of teaching education, but instead of money going for textbooks and for teachers and for the resources we need in the classroom, we'll be paying fines to federal and state officials if this isn't stopped.
So Teresa, is it really about the abortion and the contraception? I mean, isn't it a much broader thing they're trying to shut down? They're trying to shut down the Catholic Church. They're trying to shut down religion completely. I mean, they're using those as pawns. Are they not, or am I wrong?
Certainly, they are objecting to the Church's teaching that every human being has a right to be protected in law from the moment of conception to the moment of natural death. And they're objecting to the Church's idea that sexual restraint is the way that is the foundation of the marital relationship and the proper relationship between men and women. But they also are threatening other religious communities. For example, there's a case out of New York, the city of Bronx, where they are not allowing religious organizations to meet in public school buildings, although every other type of religion can meet after, or every other type of organization can meet after hours. There are a number of cases where evangelicals have objected to the sort of coercion of conscience, and yet government has continued to fine and punish the exercise of conscience. So it really is about religious freedom in this aspect, which is not to diminish the importance of protecting every human life from the moment of conception.
Right. Well, talking about the other faiths, there's a large group of all different denominations that have jumped on the bandwagon, so to say, for this protecting religious liberty, isn't there? I mean, they're just coming out of the woodwork, it seems.
I've been very pleased to see a number of organizations that have joined with the bishops in saying that you cannot force people of faith to do this. Just from a pragmatic point of view, Society as a whole needs Catholic hospitals. They need Catholic universities. They need the services we provide. And the fact that we do so out of a sense of service to our fellow man and to God is not something to be discouraged, but rather it's something to be celebrated.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so the Baptists, the Jewish community, there are Muslims that have come together and said that the free exercise clause of the First Amendment should not be treated as if it doesn't exist. It shouldn't be written out of the Constitution by executive order or some sort of administrative decision by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. I'm very optimistic about the lawsuits that have been filed. But frankly, we shouldn't have to file lawsuits to be able to serve those in need, as Christ calls
Absolutely
us to
not.
do.
No, we're going down a very frightening road. So most people agree that government is made to serve the people, not the other way around. But isn't it true that the majority of Americans do support the religious rights, our religious rights, whenever they're in conflict with the laws?
There's no question, and survey after survey shows that. Even on this mandate, which the administration has done everything it can to suggest that this is some sort of war on women, but in fact, it's not that at all. The Catholic Church has been of great service to women throughout the world and in this country in particular. We run a number of domestic abuse shelters. We never condition access to our services on things like being the wrong sex. So the idea that the Catholic Church and her teachings are in any way inimical to the good of women is just foolishness. However, what is problematic for the common good is the idea that religious believers should simply enter their churches and leave the rest of the public affairs to those who have no religious beliefs. Frankly, if we did that, it would be less than 5% of the American population entitled to participate in that conversation, because survey after survey shows that Americans are deeply religious people. And so the fact is that it is the religious impulse that causes much of what's good, much of what's right in America. When you think about successful charities, you think about Habitat for Humanity, an organization that was started by a Christian husband and wife team, and of course President Jimmy Carter, who has been so active in their housing ministry. You think of Catholic Charities and their services. You think of many, many Catholic relief organizations that work diligently. You think of the inner city schools that are such a mess, and the work of the Catholic Church there. Study after study has shown that children are more likely to graduate from high school and go on to college, having graduated from those inner city schools. So the government should not have a monopoly on helping people. In fact, the government should be the last to be involved, and only when the efforts of private associations and private individuals are insufficient to meet the need.
So, Teresa, do you think with all the lawsuits out there, are you hopeful for that to make a change?
I am, because Congress has for decades been very clear that health services does not include abortion or contraception. We've got the Hill-Burton Act, we've got we've got the Hyde Amendment that's been attached to the budget year after year that forbids the funding of abortion through federal funds. And they passed the Religious Restoration, the Restoration of Religious Freedom Act, RFRA. Now, the United States Supreme Court said that the federal government can't tell state governments what to do in that instance, but they said that act that Congress passed does control the federal government's actions. And so I'm confident that the mandate, as it's currently imposed, will not stand under statutory scrutiny, because Congress itself has said this is not what we want. I don't think the Secretary of Health gets to overrule congressional laws, congressionally enacted laws. So I'm very optimistic that we will win in these cases. If they get to the constitutional questions, their recent decision in Hosanna Tabor is something that also gives us a great deal of hope, where there was a unanimous Supreme Court opinion that talked about the ability of religious organizations to determine who they hire and what requirements exist in that. So I think these lawsuits are going to be successful. I'm grateful that a number of states' attorneys general have actually joined in those lawsuits, and I'm grateful that a number of dioceses and Catholic universities have stepped up to say, we will not give up our freedoms.
Yes, that's exciting. Well, thank you. We only have a minute left, Teresa, but are there any things that you would encourage people to do now to protect our religious freedom?
Absolutely. It's clear from the Catechism that as Catholics, we have a duty to vote, we have a duty to participate and affirming and building up the common good. And so we need to educate ourselves about these issues, and we are a democratic republic, and so our representatives are accountable to us, and so we need to educate ourselves through programs like this, through the USCCB's website on religious freedom. Minnesota Catholic Conference has just set up a wonderful new website on freedom of religion, and they have a blog. So our viewers need to go and look at those things, educate themselves, and then contact their representatives and make sure they know too that Americans value our first most cherished liberty.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for coming, and God bless you. We'll keep you in our prayers for all the good work you're doing.
Thank you.
Freedom is our right and responsibility, and we must act to protect and defend it. First, we must pray and trust in God to overturn this mandate. Secondly, we must voice the fact that we are opposed to the attack on our religious freedom. Please help spread the truth of this mandate and defend our freedom. Stay tuned. You will see important information and resources at the end of this program. If you missed part of our show, you can view it anytime on our website at catholicparents.org. Thanks for watching, and God bless you and yours.